So I'm going to walk you through how to do Chicago-style citations. Now, citations are the official way that we as scholars are able to recognize the works, phrases, and ideas of others within our own academic work. Although the process might seem a little daunting at first, it is relatively easy. It really is all about practice makes perfect. The following is meant as a guide when and when not to cite, as well as to highlight some of the more common mistakes students make when using citations. When do we need to cite? We need to cite specific facts, information, and ideas that are derived from sources. Note that these should be specific rather than general facts. You would not need to cite a statement that suggests Picasso is a great artist. That's a very general statement. But if the statement read that the League of Spanish Artists considered Picasso to be a great artist, then that would need to be cited, as that is more specific. Another example is down here. Gustave Fayette, the painter, art collector, designer of textiles, encouraged Henri Matisse to make his first trip to Algiers in the spring of 1906, and that is definitely something that we're going to cite. Not so much because we're arguing the fact that this guy is a painter, art collector, or designer of textiles. That's too general. But when you talk about something specific, that he encouraged Matisse to make his first trip to Algiers in spring of 1906, that needs to be cited. So we're going to put a citation mark at the end of this sentence there. For number 2, we always cite quotations. And quotes are tricky, and they should be placed appropriately. Your paper should not consist exclusively of cited quotations. Only use them if they fit perfectly in with your writing. Otherwise, it is better to paraphrase and cite. Stay true to your voice rather than someone else's. You'd be surprised at how much it throws the reader off, and that's completely true. I tell my students it is as jarring as hitting a speed bump at 40 miles an hour. When you use quotes, consider introducing them. Don't just drop it into a sentence. Consider who said it and why that person and his quote or her quote is important. For an example, in his landmark paper treatise, Notes of a Painter, the Fauvist artist Matisse states that all artists bear the imprint of their time, but the great artists are those in whom this is most profoundly marked. And again, we have a great quote here. We want to keep in mind that the punctuation goes within the quotation. The note goes outside the quotation. We also need citations to help define words or our interpretation of them. If you make a statement such as revelation came to Matisse from the Orient, you want to cite that because you need to define the term Orient. The Orient has different meanings. It could be the Near East, the Middle East, the Far East. All of these locations are considered the Orient. So what does not need to be cited? First of all, don't cite anything that is common knowledge. If you have a question about what is and what isn't common knowledge, all you have to do is ask your instructor. For instance, saying that Matisse was a painter born in France in 1869, none of that needs to be cited. That's very common knowledge. You're also not going to cite your own ideas or theories. So I stated in a thesis that because of Matisse's visits to North Africa in the early 1900s, he began to be influenced in the art he saw there. Prior to this, Matisse only appropriated specific artifacts from Africa into his paintings. So if you create your own idea or your own theory, you don't have to cite that. How many citations should you have? There's no specific rule for how many citations you should have in a paper. But for a standard 3 to 4 page research paper, I would imagine most instructors would want to see a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 12 citations. If you have 26 citations in a 3-page paper, that is way too many. Remember that the idea of academic writing is really to express your ideas, and you're going to use these facts from academic sources to back up your ideas, to give them credence, and that's what we need to cite. Pitfalls you should watch out for. Make sure that you know citations always go at the end of the sentence after the punctuation. So it's period, and then it is citation. Citations always go in numerical order as you're writing your paper. They go 1, 2, 3, and obviously the next one is 4. The computer creates your citations. It creates whether you're doing endnotes or footnotes. Make sure do not go back and reassign or repeat numbers. Let the computer do its job. It's been programmed to do it perfectly. Each time you cite a sentence, a new number is issued. And it is okay to have the source repeated a number of times in the endnotes. Citations, I suggest that they're in Arabic numbers. You may have other teachers that want to use Roman numerals, but when you start to write more extensively, it's so much easier to write the number 38 than try to figure out the Roman numerals. In Word, though, the default may be Roman numerals. You may have to toggle that to the standard Arabic numbers. So what's the difference between footnotes and endnotes? Footnotes appear at the bottom of the page where the citation exists, whereas endnotes appears at the end of the paper. So footnotes tend to be the default in most Word programs, but endnotes tend to be preferable in academic papers, including the one we're writing for this class. Now, other teachers and instructors may have other ideas and want you to use footnotes. You need to do what those teachers tell you to do. I prefer endnotes because endnotes do not break up the flow of the paper, which is of benefit to the reader. If you use footnotes, you need to write a little bit longer paper because those footnotes are taking up space in a 3 or 4 page paper. So that's why I like the idea of endnotes, is that they are at the end of the essay. Endnotes should be on their own page. So once your essay is complete, insert blank lines until this is accomplished. Endnotes are like in-laws. You have to have them, but it's better that they're at their own house, kind of on a separate page away from you and your paper. So you've created endnotes, but what goes there? First thing you need to do is when you insert a citation, there's going to be a number that will appear at the end of the sentence. A second number will appear at the end of your paper below a short truncated line. This is where you put your citation from the source material. You should already have the citation created in a bibliography. An annotated bibliography is what I give my students before we write the paper. So all that they have to do is cut and paste that link to the endnotes. In the case of books or magazines, periodicals, don't forget to add a page number where you got that particular amount of information that you're using in your paper. So back up here, when I wrote this number 1 here, it automatically brought me down to a short line up here, and it gave me the number 1. So I put the source material, which was Hilary Sperling's book, The Life and Times of Henri Matisse. City of publication, publisher, year it was published, and the page number. So that's mainly what goes there. Normally your entry will appear in this format if you use a book, and I just went over that in the endnote. And if you have ever any questions, you can go to the Turabian website for specific ways to list your source material, such as a magazine article or a website. Kate Turabian is the lady who is in charge of keeping Chicago-style citations updated. And so this is the URL, and this is also found through a pretty easy Google search. A couple other endnotes here. Keep in mind that we've got this article, and down here we have my explanation of what the orient means. And with that, that's where I'm going to end our presentation on citations.